Education behind bars. Rebuilding lives inside prison. Every day in prison begins with harsh lights, locked doors, and rigid routines. Most think learning ends here, but behind these walls, men are quietly reclaiming education. Not for ease, but to rebuild their lives. This is survival through learning. The day the cell became home. The first lesson prison teaches is routine, because every hour of the day is controlled, counted, and repeated until time itself feels like it has stopped moving forward. Marcus wakes up every morning in the same small cell, surrounded by concrete walls that carry every sound, every shout, and every reminder that privacy no longer exists. The bed is bolted to the floor, the mattress is thin and worn down by years of use, and the toilet sits in the open, forcing you to accept that dignity is one of the first things prison takes from you. Marcus is 34 years old, and he has been here long enough to know that prison is not just about punishment, but about pressure, mental pressure that builds slowly and quietly until it becomes heavier than the locked doors themselves. Before prison, school was something Marcus left behind early, not because he was lazy, but because he felt invisible, lost in classrooms where lessons moved faster than he could follow, and questions only brought embarrassment instead of help. Over time, skipping school became easier than feeling stupid, and survival outside became more important than education, until one bad decision led him here. Inside the prison unit, Marcus shares space with dozens of other men, all wearing the same clothes, following the same rules, and carrying different versions of regret, anger, fear, and unfinished lives. Some inmates stay loud to protect themselves, some stay silent to avoid trouble, and others learn quickly that prison rewards those who observe more than they speak. At night, when the noise finally slows, the real weight of prison settles in. As thoughts of family, lost time, and uncertain futures grow louder in the dark, making sleep difficult and silence uncomfortable. Every few days, a voice echoes through the unit calling inmates to education programs, and at first, Marcus ignores it, telling himself that school already failed him once and that prison is no place for second chances. But he begins to notice something different about the men who attend class, the way they walk with focus, the way they talk about assignments instead of trouble, and the way time seems to move faster for them than it does for everyone else. One evening, sitting on his bunk, Marcus watches his cellmate struggle through a letter from home, reading slowly and carefully, until the paper is handed to Marcus and he realizes, in that quiet moment, that he cannot read it properly himself. That realization stays with him, because in prison, not understanding words is more than embarrassment. It is danger, as rules, forms, and orders control every part of daily life. The next time the education call echoes through the unit, Marcus hesitates, knowing that walking to class means admitting weakness, but staying in the cell means staying exactly where he is. So he stands up, escorted through locked doors that open and close behind him. Marcus steps into a small classroom with old desks, a whiteboard, and an officer standing nearby, reminding everyone that this is still prison. Yet something feels different. The room is quiet, mistakes are allowed, and for the first time since arriving, Marcus feels his mind slow down, as if space has opened where fear used to sit. He does not know it yet, but this classroom, hidden behind steel doors, is about to change the way he survives prison, not by shortening his sentence, but by giving his time meaning. Learning under lock and key. The classroom does not feel like freedom, but it does not feel like the rest of the prison either, and that difference is enough to matter. Marcus quickly learns that education inside prison runs on borrowed time, because classes only exist when staffing allows it, when the unit is calm, and when nothing else in the prison goes wrong. Some days the class starts late because counts take longer than planned, and other days it is canceled without warning because of a lockdown somewhere else in the facility, reminding everyone that learning here is a privilege that can disappear at any moment. The room itself is simple and worn, with desks that have been scratched by years of restless hands and books that have passed through more lives than anyone can count. Yet for the men inside, this space feels important because it is one of the few places where their minds are allowed to move forward instead of staying stuck. The teacher speaks slowly and clearly, knowing that many of her students carry years of shame from classrooms where they were rushed, ignored, or told they were not good enough. And she understands that before learning can happen, fear has to soften. Marcus sits quietly at first, listening more than speaking, watching men twice his age struggle with basic words, others work through simple math, and a few carefully prepare for high school exams they never thought they would take. No one laughs when someone makes a mistake because almost everyone in the room knows what it feels like to be judged for not knowing something, and in prison, respect is built not through toughness here, but through effort. Outside the classroom, prison life continues at full speed, with officers calling orders, inmates arguing over small things, and tension always sitting just below the surface. But inside this room, time feels slower and more controlled. Marcus begins to notice how education changes the way the day feels, because instead of waking up only to count hours, he now wakes up thinking about assignments, spelling words, and lessons that give his mind something solid to hold on to. Studying inside a cell is not easy, as noise bleeds through the walls, lights stay on longer than they should, and privacy never exists. Yet Marcus finds himself reading the same pages again and again, not because they are exciting, but because understanding them gives him a small sense of control. Other inmates start asking him what he is learning, some out of curiosity, others out of quiet interest, and a few out of doubt, as education inside prison often challenges the unwritten rules about toughness and image. Marcus learns quickly that prison tests every positive change, because staying focused means choosing books over distractions, patience over anger, and long-term thinking over short-term reactions, which is not easy in a place designed to break routine and attention. Still, the classroom keeps pulling him back, because within those walls, he is not reduced to a number or a sentence length, but treated as someone capable of growth, even if progress comes slowly and unevenly. As weeks pass, Marcus realizes that education is not making prison easier, but it is making him stronger inside it, giving him tools to understand rules, communicate better, and think ahead instead of reacting in the moment. And without fully realizing it yet, Marcus is starting to change in ways the prison will soon notice, because learning behind bars does not stay contained in the classroom. It follows you back to the cell, into the unit, and into every decision you make. When the mind becomes the battleground, as Marcus settles into the rhythm of education, he begins to understand that learning in prison is not just about reading books or passing tests, but about fighting a daily mental battle that never truly ends. The prison does not slow down just because someone decides to improve themselves, and every day presents new distractions, new tensions, and new reasons to lose focus, especially in a place where anger is often easier than patience. Back in his unit, noise fills every corner, with televisions playing loudly, arguments breaking out over small misunderstandings, and constant movement that makes concentration feel almost impossible. Yet Marcus keeps returning to his desk, reminding himself that progress here is built in small, quiet moments. Some nights, he sits on his bunk with a workbook balanced on his knees, rereading the same paragraph again and again, not because he is lazy, but because learning something new after years of avoidance requires patience that prison rarely encourages. Mental pressure weighs heavily, as doubt creeps in with questions he cannot easily answer, asking whether any of this will matter when his sentence is over, or whether the world outside will still see him only as his worst mistake. Other inmates notice his focus, and reactions are mixed, with some offering support, others offering silence, and a few quietly testing him to see if education has made him weak, because in prison, any change can draw attention. Marcus learns quickly that staying committed means learning when to walk away, when to stay calm, and when to protect his progress, because one bad decision can remove him from programs he worked hard to enter. Education becomes more than a class schedule. It becomes a shield, a reason to avoid trouble, and a reminder that every day does not have to end the same way it begins. The prison also has its own rules around discipline, and Marcus understands that any infraction, no matter how small, could cost him access to the classroom, forcing him back into long days with nothing but empty time and restless thoughts. Transfers are always a threat, as inmates can be moved without warning to different units or even different facilities, often losing their place in education programs and having to start over, which is why many men hesitate to invest in learning at all. Marcus thinks about this often, knowing that everything he is building could be taken away suddenly, yet he continues because stopping would mean accepting that the system gets the final say over who he becomes. Slowly, his thinking begins to change, as he starts planning days instead of reacting to them, choosing words more carefully, and noticing that his temper, once quick to rise, now pauses just long enough for him to think twice. Education does not remove fear from prison, but it changes how fear is handled, turning it into awareness instead of panic, and focus instead of frustration. Marcus begins to see that survival inside prison is not only about physical strength or reputation, but about mental endurance, the ability to stay grounded in a place designed to keep you unsettled. And as his mindset shifts, the effects begin to show not just in the classroom, but in how officers observe him, how other inmates approach him, and how the prison itself starts to respond to the quiet changes taking place behind his cell door. When the system starts to notice, change inside prison rarely announces itself, but over time it becomes visible to those who are paying attention, especially in a place where behavior is tracked, documented, and quietly evaluated every single day. Marcus does not realize it at first, but officers begin to notice patterns, the way he moves through the unit without conflict, the way he follows instructions without attitude, and the way he returns to his cell with books instead of problems. In prison, attention from staff can mean many things, and not all of them are good, but steady, consistent behavior stands out in an environment where instability is common and patience is rare. Marcus learns that education changes how he is seen, not because it earns special treatment, but because it signals predictability, responsibility, and a lower risk of trouble, qualities the system quietly rewards. He is offered a better work assignment, something simple but structured, which gives him a routine that connects his education to daily responsibility, reinforcing the idea that progress here comes from showing up again and again without slipping. Other inmates begin to approach him differently as well, some asking questions about classes, others asking for help reading forms, letters, or prison notices, revealing how many men inside struggle silently with the same issues Marcus once avoided. Helping others is not officially part of his program, but it becomes part of his identity, as teaching someone else forces him to slow down, explain clearly, and realize how far he has come from the man who once avoided words altogether. At the same time, Marcus becomes more aware of the fragile balance he must maintain, because one argument, one outburst, or one moment of frustration could undo months of effort and place him back where he started. Prison discipline does not bend easily, and infractions often carry consequences that stretch far beyond punishment, cutting off access to education, work programs, and the few structured opportunities that give meaning to long sentences. Marcus feels this pressure daily, knowing that the same system beginning to acknowledge his progress is also capable of taking it away without hesitation, which forces him to stay alert, measured, and intentional in every interaction. Education begins shaping how he thinks about authority as well, helping him understand rules not just as restrictions, but as systems he must navigate carefully if he wants to protect what he is building. He listens more, reacts less, and learns that silence can be more powerful than confrontation, especially in an environment where emotions often escalate faster than reason. This shift does not make prison kinder, but it makes Marcus steadier, allowing him to move through the same harsh routines with a clearer sense of purpose and control. What started as an attempt to avoid ignorance has become a way to reshape his standing inside the prison, proving that learning does not only change minds, but also changes how the system responds to those who commit to it. And just as Marcus begins to feel grounded in this new rhythm, prison life prepares another test, one that reminds him how quickly progress can be interrupted and how fragile education behind bars truly is. When progress is put on hold, prison has a way of reminding people that nothing they build inside its walls truly belongs to them, and Marcus feels this lesson clearly the morning the alarms sound earlier than usual and the unit is ordered into lockdown without explanation. Doors slam shut, movement stops, and the quiet that follows feels heavier than noise, because lockdown does not just close cells, it closes access to everything that gives structure to the day, including education. Classes are canceled immediately, books are left sitting on classroom desks, and schedules that once gave meaning to the week are erased in a moment, leaving inmates to return to their cells with nothing but uncertainty. Marcus sits on his bunk holding his notebook, staring at pages filled with half-finished work, knowing that days or even weeks could pass before he is allowed back into the classroom. Lockdown stretches time in a way that is hard to explain, as hours blur together and frustration grows, especially for those who had finally found something productive to focus on. Some inmates react with anger, others with boredom, and many simply give up, slipping back into old habits because it feels safer to stop caring than to hope for something that might be taken away again. Marcus feels the pull of that temptation, because studying alone in a noisy cell without guidance is exhausting, and doubt starts to whisper that none of this effort will matter if the system can shut it down whenever it chooses. But he keeps reading, even when the words feel slow and the progress feels invisible, because learning has become more than a program to him. It has become a way to protect his mind from slipping into the same patterns that brought him here. Transfers loom quietly in the background as well, because inmates are often moved without warning due to overcrowding, security changes, or administrative decisions, and a transfer can mean losing access to education entirely. Marcus hears stories of men who worked for years to earn a place in a program, only to be moved to another facility where nothing followed them except their sentence and their regrets. This knowledge weighs on him, creating a tension between commitment and caution, because investing emotionally in education means risking disappointment if it is taken away. Yet Marcus continues, understanding that stopping would be a different kind of loss, one that no transfer or lockdown could excuse. When lockdown finally lifts and movement resumes, the walk back to the classroom feels different, as Marcus notices empty chairs where familiar faces once sat, men who were transferred, disciplined, or simply gave up during the break. The teacher counts attendance quietly and begins again without speeches or promises, because in prison, continuity is built through action, not reassurance. Marcus opens his notebook and feels a renewed sense of focus, not because the system has changed, but because he has, learning that progress behind bars is fragile, interrupted, and slow, yet still worth protecting. And as the class continues, Marcus realizes that education inside prison is not about perfect conditions or steady support, but about persistence in the face of constant disruption, a lesson that will soon be tested in even deeper ways as his sentence continues to unfold. Small victories and quiet respect. Over time, Marcus begins to notice subtle changes in the way people around him respond, and while prison rarely rewards effort openly, the smallest actions start to matter more than he expected. Officers begin to acknowledge him in ways that are quiet but significant, asking about his assignments or noting that he follows instructions without argument, which in a place where behavior is constantly observed, means a kind of respect is being earned silently. Other inmates notice it too, the way Marcus carries himself after class, the way he sits with a notebook rather than standing idle in the unit, and slowly some start asking questions about lessons or requesting help, revealing how much the need for guidance exists behind bars. Marcus becomes a peer tutor almost without realizing it, showing another inmate how to sound out words, explaining math problems patiently, and offering encouragement in small ways that make the classroom a shared space instead of an individual struggle. These moments of helping others do more than teach lessons. They reinforce Marcus's own learning, giving him confidence and purpose in a world where purpose is often stripped away by walls and routines. He begins to understand that survival inside prison is not only about avoiding trouble or following rules, but about shaping the environment around him, choosing interactions carefully, and building trust where it is possible to build it. At the same time, Marcus remains painfully aware of how fragile this respect is, because any infraction, an argument, a moment of anger, or a failure to follow protocol, can undo months of progress, taking away classroom privileges and the routines that have become his anchor. He learns to balance caution with effort, realizing that education is not a shield from prison life, but a strategy for moving through it with a sense of control, even if only over his own mind and choices. The mental discipline that school requires begins to carry over into the rest of his day, helping him think before reacting, listen before speaking, and focus on long-term goals rather than immediate gratification or conflict. As he reads and writes, Marcus notices the small victories that keep him going. Finishing a paragraph without mistakes, helping another inmate understand a rule, seeing an officer nod quietly at his dedication, and feeling the satisfaction of accomplishing something tangible in a place where so much is unpredictable. These victories are never celebrated with fanfare. There is no applause, no certificate in hand, no public recognition. Just quiet acknowledgement, small glances, and the internal knowledge that progress is being made. And as the weeks pass, Marcus starts to realize that the classroom is more than a room. It is a lifeline, a place where his mind can grow in a system that takes everything else, and where the seeds of hope, however small, begin to take root. Even though the walls are still steel, the doors are still locked, and the daily pressures of prison remain constant, Marcus carries the feeling of achievement with him back to his cell, understanding that each page read, each problem solved, and each lesson learned is a step toward reclaiming a part of himself that he thought prison had taken forever. The spark that can't be locked away. The classroom is quiet now. Desks are worn, books stacked neatly, and sunlight, or at least the faint glow of morning, creeps in through small windows. Marcus sits at his desk, notebook open, pen in hand, not for rules, not for orders, but for himself. He looks around at the empty chairs of men who were transferred, disciplined, or discouraged, and realizes that progress in prison is fragile, interrupted, and often invisible. Yet in these moments, he understands something powerful. Change begins quietly, inside the mind, and cannot be locked away. Education behind bars is not a promise of freedom. It does not erase past mistakes, erase regret, or erase pain, but it gives something almost as important: choice. The choice to think, to grow, to hope, and to carry a sense of purpose even when every wall tells you to give up. Marcus closes his notebook and looks out the window. He knows the walls are still there. The doors are still locked. The system is still rigid. But for the first time, he feels that his mind, his effort, and his future are his own. From cells to classrooms, from fear to focus, from survival to small victories, the journey of education behind bars proves one undeniable truth. No system can imprison the spark of a human mind willing to learn, change, and rebuild. And that spark, once lit, can illuminate the path not just for one man, but for all who dare to take the first step toward hope.